Welcome to Liberty Sound with your host, Ryan Hill.
There's going to be a new world order out there. We've got to lead it.
And I'm going to nominate Donald Trump for Speaker of the United States House of Representatives.
Welcome to the show. This is Liberty Sound. I'm Ryan Hill, and we're live on Podbean. Later on, you can catch this show, of course, on Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, and all the other channels. The video files will be up on Rumble and YouTube, and notes will be in the description of the show. As soon as I get done here, I will post those in. If you want to follow me, I am on Twitter, I'm on Truth, I'm on Telegram, I'm on Gab. Most of those I'm known as FOA Ryan, but on Telegram it's FOA Universe. That's FOA is how you spell FOA. Long story, sometime I'll tell you about it, but that's not why we're here today. Today, coming up on the show, we're going to talk about maybe second half, my encounter with fake meat. It was so gross. I hadn't thought about it until I was looking at my notes before I got on today. And, I think I'll forget it again after I'm done, if you don't mind. And then we're also going to address the question, is it Red October? What's going on here? So there's been a lot of talks going on with submarines and October and movie plots fulfilling themselves in real life, comes and goes. Really, we're starting to get close to the midterms. And that's what I want to open up with today is, here they come. Here come the midterms. And surprisingly, to some at least, I'm not surprised. You may not be surprised, but abortion is not going to be the issue that defines the midterms. I mean, just a couple of months ago, there was a lot of noise being made after the Supreme Court decision led to the overturn of Roe versus Wade. But when it comes to maintaining the fervor of something like that, a couple of months is a long time. And that was at the beginning of the summer. Now we're at the beginning of fall. I mean, it's been a quarter since that's happened at least. And there's been a lot of other news going on, and not the least of which is what I just alluded to is the ongoing tensions with Russia. So what exactly is going to be the theme? What are the midterms all about? What are the issues? I definitely think the economy's up there. I mean, gas is still expensive. I just put some more gas in my tank today. Like a few weeks ago, I mentioned that there was some news about Russia and the pipeline. I don't remember what it was then. And I thought, I'm going to go ahead and fill up my tank right now, even though it's not empty, because I'm thinking it could jump up by a good 20 or 30 cents. Well, it didn't then, and it may not do it exactly at this moment right now. But as long as this continues, we're not seeing any reduction. And frankly, I don't really even know what the price of oil has exactly to do with this conflict. It's more about natural gas, isn't it? I mean, isn't that what the Nord Stream is delivering? It's natural gas to Europe, and they're having to make these purchases. I do think oil is part of it because Russia is an exporter of oil like we used to be here in the United States, and can and should be once again. In fact, I believe we will. It's inevitable. But politically right now, we're being held hostage. We, the American people, are being held hostage while we're being told that Putin is holding Ukraine and the districts or whatever it was, that were just annexed the last on Friday. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit in a second. But so what I'm saying here is basically there isn't a V issue for the midterms, and that's pretty interesting because in terms of, who's going to get control of Congress and the Senate, both are technically up for grabs. The House is always up for grabs because everybody has to go every 2 years to get elected, except for, those weird special elections that are at different times. In the Senate, however, there's 13, 17 different seats that are up and available, which is a pretty good chunk. That's about a third of the Senate, as opposed to sometimes it's only just a few. It just depends on those cycles too. So either chamber could change power or it could stay the same. And since there is not an overarching issue, there's not it's not abortion, it's not Putin, it's not inflation, it's kind of a little bit of all of those things. I think you have to use some political logic that's akin to like a generic ballot. And then, really, and I don't want to hat tip Mitch McConnell, but I heard a clip of him saying it the other day. It's going to come down to the quality of the candidates. That's actually not, wrong, I guess. I mean, it's not what you want your ostensible leader, your Republican former majority leader, who's now the minority leader, I suppose. You want them to give a little bit more support for their team, but it sounds like he's just bitter about Trump and doesn't want any Trump allies to win. And he'd rather, be subservient to people like Harry Reid, who is no longer, in office. But the point is, or is even, I hope he's still alive. I didn't plan to mention his name. I'm just saying, it's not like Mitch McConnell is in that much of a hurry to go back and be the majority leader. And I hope he never will be again anyways. If Republicans get a majority, we need somebody, you know, somebody who wants the job, of course, but somebody more along the lines of a Ted Cruz, or maybe a Ted Cruz when he's running for something, because he seems like he kind of comes and goes, and you can't always be in the forefront of the news. But he was on TV the other day and got some good, he got fired up. Ted Cruz. We kind of like that guy. The more lawyerly Ted Cruz that reads Green Eggs and Ham, not really my favorite moments of his. But nonetheless, he is a fighter, and that's what I like about him. So before we get into headlines today, just as of a couple of moments before I came on the air today, Trump has asked the Supreme Court to vacate the stay of the Mar-a-Lago docs that the lower court, the district court in Florida, issued, which, that's been the ongoing battle. That's another issue. That's going to play into the midterms. And as much as I'm not sure who exactly it is, and I'm pointing out, I've just heard it in a few different places. There are people on the Republican side of the elections that are saying we shouldn't talk about this. And I disagree. We need to talk about it because it's not about Trump. It's about our rights. It's about liberty, which is what this show is about. And you've got to have, you can't just say, well, we can't talk about it because it's going to be a distraction. No, it is the issue, is what I'm saying. So that's going to come and continue to be a story. It sounds like there could be some changes. Something could happen before the election. Who knows if that will be our October surprise? I've got some speculation about a different one, which is coming up here in a minute. But, what exactly is going, there's a lot that can happen. It's 4 weeks out now from the election. And there's not much time for people's opinions to change, but could some big news splash come in and change people's minds? Well, we'll see. And then on top of that, there's the fact that we're still facing election integrity concerns. I believe in some states, the picture is better than in others. In my home state here in Oklahoma, I guess technically my home state would really be Texas. That's where I was born, lived the first 17 years of my life. And since then, I've lived in Missouri and now Oklahoma. But I've also lived in Oklahoma now, I think, just about as long as I lived in Texas. So I've spent about half my life here. And so they're both my homes. They're also very close. So it's easy to find your way back if you get lost. But, it's just, I don't know. We'll see. We'll keep tracking it and we'll see what issues materialize. But I do think people are locked in. And I think that the, voting system is locked in for November. So wherever we're at right now is probably where we're going to be in November. We'll see. I'm hopeful that we will see some significant gains in such a way that there's not enough phantom anything out there to prevent it, especially, like I said, when you're looking at state by state by state. There may be some places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona. I mean, really, I could just keep naming off a bunch of states here where maybe not. We'll see. As excited as we were about Carrie Lake winning the primary, she now has to still face the general election, and I hope to see her win. I think she's a breath of fresh air as far as I'm concerned on the Republican side. And you notice she gets attacked a lot like Trump. She is not the personality of Trump, and she doesn't have the preconceived ideas that were associated with Trump. It was really easy to play against people because of his personality, but nobody really knew Carrie Lake except locally, like in her state. So it's not as easy for the media to go attack her. She's also very effective at fending off those attacks. All right, so let's get into some headlines. I think I'm running on time today, and that is a good thing because I've been running over a little bit lately, having way too much content. And I do have a lot, but I think it's a little bit more organized today. So, Elon Musk, who also is in the news quite a bit and people have a lot of hot opinions about, he has, I mean, I had to keep changing my sentence as I was writing my show prep because while I was preparing for the show today, he's now bought Twitter. Okay, so it's final, it's done, it's going through, or it's as final as practically speaking can be. And I think as soon as Friday, it may be officially handed over to him. So he is settled at apparently the price of 54.20, just like the original share price that he offered. And the stock has, at least in the last little bit before I came on the air, the stock has gone up. So of course it has, because I think there's a lot of optimism associated. The media is going to try to get people as pessimistic as possible whenever possible, but I think the optimism of investors is going to take hold there because he's somebody he's an engineer, okay, and whether you think he's a globalist puppet or a lizard or a ferret for all I care, he does know how to get processes working, and he's somebody I've always looked up to in the business world. I used to put I was such a I would troll people with my backgrounds whenever I have been in these open office environments where everybody can see your screen. Well, Elon Musk is always getting in the news, so I'd put a SpaceX rocket as my background. I'd put the Cybertruck, which, I mean, hey, if somebody wants to get me one of those Cybertrucks, I'm not really even a big fan of electric cars. I mean, as a concept, I think they're kind of cool, but the Cybertruck, people balk at it, and go look it up if you haven't seen it before. It looks like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's got these angles. You can find the video of him. It was supposed to have an indestructible window, and he put a hammer through it, and oops, it went through. I think that was planned. That had to have been planned. But anyways, it's got a lot of angles. It looks very awkward until after you have looked at the different viewing, photo angles that they have to show it on a road, to show it from the top, to show it from the side. And then you go look at a pickup truck, like a regular pickup. And then you have to kind of rub your eyes like, that's what trucks look like? That's ridiculous. And then all of a sudden, all you can see is the Cybertruck. But it has not taken hold just yet. And I suspect with our global energy crisis that is ongoing, it's not going to take hold for anytime soon. But maybe one day we can all have cyber 4x4s and cyber trucks. So okay, back to getting on topic a little bit more here. I'm talking about Elon, and I was just giving you some filler material there. But before, what led up to this deal today, and why I originally even was bringing him up, was just like a day or two ago, he put a tweet out there on Twitter that said, "Hey, I've got a proposal for how we can have peace in the whole Ukraine-Russia conflict." And part of his proposal included basically a referendum. Let the territories that Russia just annexed, and I think he included Crimea in it too, who have all, by the way, since 2014 they've already had some kind of a vote or something. I don't know all the details. I know Crimea did. They voted to break away from Ukraine and join Russia, and that was a big controversy then. And then when Russia recognized the independence, now they've annexed the other territories that are along that the Black Sea seaboard. They The idea for Elon was to say, hey, let them have a vote, let the UN supervise it, which, I mean, that wouldn't give me a lot of confidence, but I guess it probably would give Europeans some confidence, give the news some credibility to it. So it's a great idea, right? So of course it was immediately shot down by Zelensky, who is against it because he wants those territories back. And I do have to say it this time. So I discovered in the last couple of days that YouTube has a very strict policy on support for this war, and you're not allowed to support it. You cannot put content on YouTube that supports the war. Now, I, of course, have been consistent throughout this entire process. Number one, this broke as I was beginning this podcast at the beginning of the year, the whole conflict that we're currently in. The entire time, two things have been true about me. Number one, I'm not going to censor myself, and that's why I've already had, I've been censored by the system, by the algorithm a couple of times already. No, I'm not going to censor myself. I'm going to say what I think and what I believe. But number two, I don't support this war. I don't want a war with Ukraine, or I mean, sorry, with Russia, or either of them. I don't want a war with anybody, but I don't want us to go to war with Russia. And in fact, I don't even want us to be funding war efforts, which we are currently doing, in which President Biden, I guess today or yesterday, vowed to send another 600 plus million in addition to the billions we've already sent and the weapons and everything else. And I'm not saying during the ordinary course of events that we don't sell arms to our allies or to countries where we think it would be strategically beneficial for us to have a strong power there. I'm not saying that, but right now, anything we send to Ukraine, as far as I'm concerned, is an act of war. And it could, if you were on the other side of this, put away your opinions about whether this is a it's moral or whether it's right. There's a lot of dead bodies that have piled up, of course, during this process of war. But if you're on the other side of that, and the U.S. is funding billions of dollars to the country that you're fighting against, you would interpret that as an act of war. So it's kind of surprising that we haven't seen more hostility really out of Russia, other than probably Putin's not as crazy as he gets talked about. He might not be in the right on this. And I've got, kind of mixed feelings about what exactly are the motives behind what they're doing. I think part of it's a power play, but part of it is they are trying to defend their own territory in a very Russian sort of way. And maybe one day I can have some Russian friends on and explain the Russian mindset, because it's a lot different than the way we think here in the West. They are not a Western country. They're not even in Europe. I mean, most of Russia is not considered part of Europe. It's considered part of Asia, kind of like Turkey. So, in those two countries are always hotbeds for this type of activity, and the West has certain opinions about it, and they have certain opinions about it. So, okay, moving on. But Zelensky's against the vote because apparently he doesn't want peace and he doesn't want the will of the people in those territories to be respected. I find that highly suspicious, don't you? So let's move on now to a lighter story with a little piece of audio. My heart goes out to my Floridian friends. I haven't talked to anybody that's down there since this has gone on, but I've seen, at least online, looks like everybody's okay. Not everybody's okay. But first, let's talk about the fake news, and then we'll talk about what is apparently the real news, and it's kind of sad. So the fake news is CNN had this. You may have seen the clip the other day. We got the audio from it. There is a weatherman who sounds like he's either with the National Weather Service. I don't know if he was a Weather Channel guy or who he was, but he is out there reporting in some street where the wind's blowing and it's raining, and it's while Ian was rolling through in Florida. And he is talking about how windy it is, and we got to take these wind advisories seriously. However, while he's doing this and hunkering down in the wind, there's a guy walking behind him out to his car, and doesn't look like an athletic individual of any type. He's, bigger in stature than the weather guy on the screen or in front of the camera. And he's not having any trouble at all. He just goes to his car, opens it, and gets in. So here's what this guy sounded like.
The way that we are getting whipped around and battered by this violent wind is enough reason for us, the National Weather Service, to issue those extreme wind warnings. Look, we are on. You gotta bear with me.
Yeah, I'll bear with you, guy. He keeps pausing, and he sounds so distressed and wind chapped, and he's holding on to his hat or his hood, whatever it was that he had on top of his head, and he keeps crouching down slightly. The camera is shaking as though it's being blown around by the wind, and the guy just walks behind him about 50 feet, 25 to 50 feet behind him, gets into his car, and the wind doesn't even in Oklahoma, it gets windy like 30 miles an hour, and that'll blow your car door open when you have to hold on to the thing so it doesn't, whip out there. And this guy just gets in his car. No big deal. So that's CNN for you. That's our state of TV meteorology. God bless the real meteorologists out there that don't just depend on computer models. And yes, computers can be powerful. Yes, they can aid in reporting the weather, but you also have to use your common sense, and you have to not fake like you're being blown around by winds that aren't really there. You couldn't even hear the winds in the audio and the camera. They can clean up a lot. Okay, the professional studios can, even live, with all kinds of methods that I don't really have mastered just yet. Maybe one day I'll have some help here in the studio, but you don't hear any wind even in that video. And for as windy as they're claiming it was, that was just silly. So now on to the more tragic side of that is the death toll is said to be over 100 now, 100 human deaths. According to Fox News, or I'm sorry, Fox News, Yahoo News, a little bit different. The death toll rises as criticism of Ron DeSantis mounts. The death toll from Hurricane Ian has reportedly risen to nearly 100 in Florida, and there are, I think, deaths outside of Florida too, as rescue personnel continue to search for survivors. Officials in the U.S. state have come under fire as critics allege residents in some hard-hit areas did not receive enough advance warning to evacuate. More than a half of the deaths are recorded in Lee County alone, where Ian made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane. And of course, you remember it was almost a Category 5. It was just below being classified as a Cat 5, but it wasn't, which is good. But at the beginning, there was a report, and I commented on Truth. I think this was a Carly Bond Truth that she put out, and she was putting a video, or it was part of a recording from some local station that said there had been hundreds of deaths. And I just remember thinking, it doesn't sound right. Like, I've heard of some deaths in a hurricane before, but 100 deaths, and it doesn't even seem like, it just seemed like the biggest issue was really the storm surge and the damage it was going to do to properties. But they had an evacuation notice, and somehow that apparently did not go as well as, sadly, a lot of conservative media hosts were, playing it up to be. And they're saying that in Florida alone, there's at least 68 dead, but I think they're saying it's close to 100 now. So it may be 50 or 60 just in that Lee County. So I'm terribly sorry for anybody that is suffering this loss. If your family or friends, I mean, your homes, the homes are secondary. I mean, that's terrible and tragic in its own right. And I've seen the carnage. It's like after we have our tornadoes here, but we always pick up the pieces. Okay, you can rebuild a home. You could, even if you don't have insurance, even if FEMA leaves you out of there and you have to start all the way over from nothing. Hey, if you have your life and you're not maimed, you can rebuild. But sadly, looks like lives have been lost. Now, I'm not ready to blame anybody. Okay, I don't know the details. I don't know if there was enough evacuation warning or not. I do know that a lot of people have moved to Florida since there has been a significant hurricane hit them like this. But at the same time, so maybe they didn't get enough messaging from the government, which I believe that is a responsibility of government to protect your citizens, in your local area at the very least. The actual safety. We're not talking about masks and COVID. We're talking about a hurricane, which, by the way, I always said at the beginning, I support hurricane evacuations. And so I was kind of like on the fence about masks until I just saw how ridiculous it was by reading. But anyways, this is something we'll have to follow up on, and I'm sure there will be a lot to talk about. But hey, we can't ignore an issue because it might hurt Ron DeSantis. I'm sorry. I thought he was a great governor. I think he's doing a lot of good things down there in Florida. I don't agree with everything that he's done, but there has to be accountability. If things were done wrong, if they were not properly taking care of these evacuations, whatever, we're going to have to find out what happened. But the media also shares blame because they're so busy talking about Trump and Mar-a-Lago and Elon Musk and everything else we've talked about today, and equity, as we're about to get into, that they were not helping with the evacuation effort either, I happened to notice. So let's see. The next thing up here is got a couple sound bites for you from Kamala. I'm so sorry, but we are going to listen to it because it affects liberty. It is something we need to be able to articulate, and not everybody knows about. So what is this equity talk that Kamala is talking about? It's not equality. In fact, she makes it very clear and has made it even more so clear since the time I was getting ready for this show. But we've got her original clip over the weekend. Listen to this, and then we'll comment.
It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions and impacted by issues that are not of their own making. And so
women.
Absolutely. And so we have to address this in a way that is about giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place. And if we want people to be in an equal place, sometimes we have to take into account those disparities and do that work.
So we fight for equality, but we also fight for equity. What's that all about? And she says, well, not everybody starts from the same place. And maybe you didn't catch it because it's kind of difficult when people like this are speaking. They throw so many different, they distract you in the middle of their statement that they're trying to get out. So, sorry if I ever do that too, by the way, but that's why I've got this as a shorter clip. She's saying it's not enough to give everybody an equal opportunity because, in her words, not everybody starts from the same place. Listen to this again.
Giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place. And if we want people to be in an equal place, sometimes we have to take into account those disparities.
If we want everyone to be in an equal place, we have to take into account those disparities. I thought she was just going to leave it at take. We have to take from somebody else who had a better opportunity or started off at a better place. So if you don't view things through the lens of skin color and race and ethnicity, as most of us, we just live our lives, okay? We just live our lives. We don't really think about it. Okay, but that's not enough for the progressive left. If you don't look at things through that lens, then it's not, that would sound probably fine. I mean, some people start off in poor neighborhoods. Okay, but to you and me, a poor neighborhood is just a low income area. It's a poor part of town. It's maybe not the nicest part of town. It's a place that if you were born in, you hope that maybe you can get out of someday. Okay, that's what I would think. But in their progressive left liberal minds, and it's not even liberal. Forgive me for saying that. In their progressive socialist minds, it's about skin color. Okay, it's not all poor people. It's only poor people who are black, or it's not Asian. Okay, and I don't hear anything about Native Americans anymore. It seems like they were just a political pawn when it was convenient. And there's still a lot of things that need to be addressed with the Native American populations in this country. They're it's not working out the way things are set. And forgive me for a second as I'm swatting a mosquito or a fly or a gnat or something that got into the studio. I don't know how this happened, but we're going to have better screening at the door here before I go on next time. I'm not sure who to complain to about that because, again, I guess now I have to hire myself as my own security staff. So that's all I want to say about that. But just Kamala has repeated it again. She's doubled down on this and said that, that we have to have equity, which means equal outcomes. It's not equal opportunity. This doesn't even sound like affirmative action. Affirmative action was an idea to it was kind of like the miniature reset as opposed to the great reset, but it was supposed to right a wrong. And in my opinion, it's been righted, and we don't need to continue to have affirmative actions. I think just requiring, equal housing lenders and equal opportunity employers, I think that's enough. But it'll never be enough for a progressive, because that's the definition of a progressive socialist, is they're always looking to keep progressing. So let's jump over to a little bit of a lighthearted story. I'm getting close to break time here. Authorities probing report of scandal at a fishing tournament. That's right. ABC News reports out of Cleveland that the county prosecutor's office in Cleveland has opened up an investigation into an apparent cheating scandal during a lucrative walleye fishing tournament on Lake Erie last week. And the article says a video was posted to Twitter showing Jason Fisher, tournament director for the Lake Erie Walleye Trail, cutting open the winning catch of 5 walleye on Friday and finding lead weights prepared fish fillets inside them. I didn't see that part before. So they put lead weights and fish fillets. That must have been part of the bait or something. I don't know what a walleye eats. The winning anglers, Jacob Runyon of Broadview Heights, Ohio, and Chase Kaminsky of Hermitage, Pennsylvania, were immediately disqualified. The video shows Fisher urging Runyon to leave for his own safety as people hurled expletive-laced insults at him. And yeah, I can imagine if you cheat at a fishing tournament, you probably need to get out of town real fast when you're discovered. But isn't it interesting how quickly the win was revoked when they discovered that there was cheating? It's kind of odd, isn't it? I don't know who does that. That's crazy. All right, so enough stalling. Is it Red October? Let me make sure I've got my article pulled up. Yeah, I do. Is it Red October? According to the Daily Mail, Putin has deployed Belgorod nuclear submarine, or or I don't know if it's one or multiple, which carries Poseidon underwater drone capable of unleashing radioactive tsunamis. What a headline, oh my goodness. Which lay waste to enemy coastlines. Specifically coastlines, okay. Well, that would make sense if it's a tsunami. So a couple of points from the article. I love how they summarize in the Daily Mail. The nuclear submarine, I guess Belgorod is the name of the submarine. It's not a class. That's what I thought it was at first. It has left its White Sea base. It's claimed, so it must be according to some anonymous source familiar with Putin's political thinking or military strategy. NATO has warned the sub might be on a mission to test the drone, according to Italian media. And Poseidon is a doomsday device. It's designed to trigger a 1,600-foot nuclear tsunami. Now, that's an interesting idea for a weapon. They get creative over there, don't they? I've seen the railgun, but I believe the U.S. has comparable firepower. And, that's going to be, next time there's like a hot war conflict, expect to see the railgun pulled out. And that thing is something else. I mean, it fires, I forget how many, it's like, I don't know. I'm not going to guess what the rate is, but it is quite a bit. So this seems to be something that, people are throwing around and saying that it's saber rattling. Did I hear that right?
Saber.
I did. They're rattling their sabers just like Kim Jong-un over in North Korea. And if you don't know that reference, that's a Sean Connery impersonation by the name just slipped my mind, but it's from a 1990s Saturday Night Live skit. Everybody knows what that is. You can't be on the internet not know what that is. I don't know. Maybe I'm older than I think I am. So I think that's enough about that. We'll talk about Red October when we get back from the break. For the break today, I've got a nice little excerpt from the interview that Dr. Simone Gold did the other day after getting released from prison.
You don't know if you're going to a maximum security. You don't know. Somebody may try to kill you. I mean, we hear about that.
Were you
right?
scared?
I was.
Yeah.
I was.
Of course.
I mean,
because you hear the horror stories of things that happen to people in prisons like that.
I was. I mean, there's no question. I was scared. What happened initially was very shocking, which is they do quarantine, but they do it in a manner that I think is horrifically illegal. I wish I could have pulled some strings for the women that are going through this. But they put the women in quarantine in isolation cells, the punishment cells, wow, which I can't believe is permissible. And
so that's what happened to you. Let's just take us through your story. You go in, they put you in an isolation cell?
They put us in they put each woman who's coming into the building into an isolation cell. Initially, it was 21 days, then it was 14 days, then it was 10 days. Meaning they never told me how long it would be. It turned out it was 8 days, but I didn't know at the outset what it would be. And they drop you here, and you are completely powerless, and it's a pretty bad place.
How big was it?
7 by 10. 7. So 7. by 10.
So what did you have, like a...
So you had a metal, I don't want to call it a bed, you had a metal rack, like you get at Home Depot, right? A metal rack that you put your Tupperware on in the garage. You had a metal rack and a pad about that thick, and that was your sleeping area, and then one above it, right? But I was by myself, and that was it. And there was like a little corner ledge that you could write on, but they didn't give me any pen, paper, pencil, nothing.
have a commode in there, I guess?
And there's a built-in, like, one commode and a little sink.
Okay.
But they didn't give you, they brought meals 3 times a day, and they didn't give me a cup. I didn't drink for 2 days. I kept asking the guard for a cup, and they were very rude about it. And it was just kind of like that. Like,
Didn't
you're
they tell
utterly
you to use
powerless.
your hands?
They did. So, yeah, I was going to say the guy's name. He just was a
So
terrible
just
guard.
your hand drink out of the
Yeah,
sink?
so I said, he said, use your hand. And I said, for a week, because I didn't know how long it'd be. And he goes, use 2 hands. I mean, it was just so over the top nasty.
And we're back. Well, have you heard of this Beyond Meat craze? And I do mean craze because it's a little bit cray. I'm talking about the artificial meat substitutes that are starting to be sold in grocery stores and some restaurants, especially fast food restaurants near you. Well, the other day I made the mistake of going to a place which I won't even say what type of food it was or what restaurant name it was because I don't want to give that away. It's not really about them, although I have submitted my feedback directly to this company. I ordered something off a menu at a place I hadn't been to in probably at least a year, and so I'm not familiar with the menu. I don't actually eat out quite that much. I mean, there's a few places I go to for convenience regularly for breakfast or lunch or something, but I usually cook dinner, and I usually, try to make a lunch so that I don't have to spend all my hard-earned money, and breakfast too. Especially right now, I'm kind of at a time where I'm trying to pinch my pennies, so to speak. And so I go out to eat, and I'm looking forward to it because, hey, I'm going to pay somebody for a meal, and I don't have to cook it, I don't have to clean up, and I was, running an errand, and I ended up ordering something in my hurry off of this menu that it did say Beyond, but it was supposed to contain chicken. Okay, now I've heard of like Beyond Beef and like the plant burgers and all that stuff, but I hadn't. My brain just has not yet clicked to watch out for this term, and I didn't think that something could be advertised as chicken that was not chicken. And so I ordered my meal and I started eating it, and there was other ingredients too besides just the chicken. And so I'm eating some of them, and I had maybe a few bites. And it took me a couple of these little, chicken slices or whatever to realize that something's not right here. This is really chewy, first of all. Like they overcooked it, or I just got the bad pieces of this chicken. It's just the, fat near the tendon or something like that. And then I realized, wait a second, what was this called? This is called Beyond. And I'm like looking back at the menu and I'm looking at my food, and I'm like, they sure put a ton of spices on the actual pieces of chicken. And then it realized immediately, this is not chicken. It's not even close. It's plant-based garbage. And so I had already eaten like half the meal. And so I was so mad. And it was technically my fault for not, understanding what it was. I think that the person that served me even said, like, are you sure this is what you want? But they didn't tell me, are you sure you want fake food? You want fake meat? And oh my goodness, don't fall for it. It's gross. There's no telling what's in it. It's probably genetically modified. It's bad for you. Okay. It's bad for your psyche. Oh, it's disgusting. That's the October surprise right there. That's nuclear level food mismanagement. Oh my goodness. So I do want to say my theory on what the October surprise might be in light of what we just talked about before the break with Russia and with everything else going on. Here's my best guess at what the October surprise will be. And yes, it affects U.S. politics. A Russian submarine captain will defect in late October, carrying nothing other than Hunter Biden's laptop because they've got a copy of it or something, or maybe the original one. Who knows? That's my theory. And that would totally flip the midterms on their head and probably get a lot of people out to vote who are going to sit home. The Dems may be just counting on mail-in votes as they have been increasingly doing over the last however many years. Every time I look into it, it turns out it's gone back, quite a ways. It was before 2016 maybe from 2012, at least in my state, is when that really started to pick up. And I'm going to learn some more about that tomorrow, actually. Seth Keshel, who has been a warrior, Captain Seth Keshel in the election integrity movement, will be speaking locally in Edmond, Oklahoma. And by the time you hear this broadcast, you may have already spoken. So look for on my social media and his. I'll try to put videos out there of it. But he's going to have a lot more in-depth things on Oklahoma and our registrations and all that. But it's definitely we've seen an uptick, whether it's legitimate or otherwise, in the absentee mail-in voting. And when voter motivation is low, that is a recipe to win. It's something the Republicans have, not done well for the most part. And, even in the legit level playing field head to head, that's an advantage for the Democrats. So a couple of topics I want to get discussed here today before we get to the end of the program. Did you hear that the student loan forgiveness plan has changed? Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of people celebrating, in fact, millions of people celebrating who their party has come to an end. It turns out some 700,000 to 800,000 borrowers, it may be higher than that from what I read today, they won't qualify for student loan forgiveness, partly due to a language change that's going to prevent them from converting their loans. So, what am I talking about here? It says, according to CNBC, and this was updated on Thursday, actually, so back in September, into September, buried in the news, of course, 4 million borrowers will now be excluded from the student loan forgiveness program announced by none other than President Biden. After the millions celebrated the announcement of federal student loan forgiveness, some are now having that excitement taken away from them. It was a change published by the Federal Student Aid website that says those that were held by the Department of Education or not held by the Department of Education in firms such as the Federal Family Education Loan, or FFEL, or Perkins loans are not eligible for this one-time forgiveness. And apparently, before this change, that may have already been the case, but people were getting smart and crafty, and they were converting those loans into the current federal loans program. And despite the word federal being in the name of the Federal Family Education Loan Program, plus the Perkins Loan Program, they're not actually held by the Department of Education. So that means that you wouldn't be eligible unless you converted your loan to that. Well, you see, they discontinued these programs in 2010 because the government federalized the student loan operation. And now those with the oldest debt, who arguably, at least from my perspective, are most deserving of student loan forgiveness, unless they just flat out haven't been paying anything, but those who have been trying to pay it off. I mean, if you still got student loan debt from 2010, brother, sister, let me tell you, you need to get on the ball. Okay, you need to make some priorities. I know it might be difficult, but you've got to figure this out. You've got to rearrange something. You've got to sell something. You've got to, pick up an extra job or whatever. Don't just be like, oh, they suspended the interest and oh, they suspended payments, so I'm not going to pay. It's going to get worse for you. Let me tell you, anytime there is an interest-free period, a lot of credit cards or loans that are installments, they will give you a little bit of grace time that it's interest-free, and everybody thinks, oh, I'll pay it off before that interest comes due. And then, or even if I don't, at least it'll just start, accruing interest then. But usually what they do is they actually backdate all the interest. So as soon as they start charging it, you get the interest that, on the balance that's then, but also all the interest that you should have had originally. So watch out for that. This accounts for some 7% or $113 million of loans. So 7% of the overall student loan debt pool. And it affects up to 4 million borrowers who are not going to be happy. Now, if they've already voted by mail for their favorite student loan forgiveness uncle, talking about Joe Biden, of course, they may be regretting that. There's another reason to do away with excessive early voting. I'm not totally against early voting, but like a month early, that's too early. All right. And by the way, they wouldn't have been voting for Biden, but they'd be voting for the party that Biden belongs to. Next up, recession coming? I don't know. This would be a quick one, but quarter three numbers are going to be released soon. We're going to get GDP for quarter three. And I think that's going to come in before the elections, right? It should come in this month. We should have a preliminary number by the middle of the month, and usually they revise those. But something tells me it's not going to be looking so great, and that will also play in on the economic side when it comes to election day. The August or September hiring numbers that were released dropped very sharply, very steep drop. It's the second steepest, from what I understand, second only to the drop we saw during COVID in 2020. So that's kind of concerning. I've heard about an inflation of job openings, that a lot of companies were, like some of these corporations, were leaving job openings out there that weren't really opening because it made it, there's different reasons why it looks good to a corporate wiggity woo. They will do that for some reason, but now that's coming off. So I don't know if that's just that, or something tells me no, something tells me it is real. But we still have a holiday season coming up, so I don't think that's going to ramp up in time, unfortunately, for our Democrats. They're not going to see that happen until after the election. But we'll see. I expect Q3 to be another negative growth quarter. If not, it might be slightly positive. And that's not looking good. That's stagflation. That's inflation. That's a stagnant economy. It's as good as a recession, really. I mean, if it's just neutral, not growing, or in some ways that's almost worse, because a recession might mean like a natural reset, but just staying where it is, that's just, I mean, while prices go up, that's not going to help anybody. All right, so one of the last bits I have for you today, I caught this video of Tucker's special segment last night on, I think it was last night, on the Las Vegas shooting anniversary. It's been 5 years since that occurred. I was just talking about it the other day. I've actually stayed in the Mandalay Bay myself, and I think I was in the same wing where that shooting was allegedly carried out from. I mean, I assume that's where the bullets came from some of the bullets, but I'm not going to get into all of that. Let's play a little bit of Tucker's segment, because I thought he did a good thing bringing this up. He brings up this stuff about, these topics that people don't really want to discuss. And it's kind of painful, but I think we need to remember this. We need to honor those who are fallen. These are just people out trying to enjoy their lives, live in freedom, like we advocate here on this program. And this is what happened to him. Listen to this.
Someone help me, please. Please.
It was 5 years ago this week, October 1st, 2017, that police say a man in his 60s called Stephen Paddock smashed out the window of his hotel room on the 32nd floor of the building right behind us, the Mandalay Bay, and rained rifle rounds down on a crowd of concert goers. Police say Paddock continued to fire until he shot himself to death. And that's how they found him when they breached the door and entered his room.
There's a lot of questions from that night. I've seen other footage, which I will not discuss here because I guarantee you it'll be stripped within seconds of posting. That what exactly happened that night, I'm not confident that we even know that, though most people feel that we have a good narrative of what occurred that night. We don't have a lot of those answers, and that's exactly what Tucker was bringing up, because remember all those press conferences? Wish I had time to go into more of it, but here's part 2 of what his segment was talking about.
In the days after the crime, questions emerged. Who was Stephen Paddock? He had no criminal record. He had no obvious political motive. In fact, he had no obvious motive of any kind.
What we know is Stephen Paddock is a man who spent decades acquiring weapons and ammo and living a secret life, much of which will never be fully understood.
Could he have done this alone? The circumstantial evidence suggested possibly, but possibly not. How did he get so many firearms and so much ammunition into a hotel room without being seen?
What do you see?
An armory.
An armory.
So many guns, so many magazines, stacks and stacks of magazines everywhere.
And witnesses. Where were they? At least one fled to Mexico. And to this day, it is very difficult to get even the most basic questions answered about this.
What we have been able to answer are the questions of who, what, when, where, and how. What we have not been able to definitively answer is the why Stephen Paddock committed this act.
And something tells me we'll be wondering for a long time, like we do in many cases and many things that happen in our lives in this world. He also, by the way, before I move on, he had tannerite, which is an explosive material that's used like for range practice. And I've actually shot tannerite before, and it explodes. It makes a loud bang. He had that in his car, and ammonium nitrate, like which was used in the Oklahoma City bombing many years ago, right here in Oklahoma City, where I live. And he was evidently planning this for years with no clear motive. Just doesn't make any sense, does it? ISIS took credit several days after it occurred, but were they really credible? And have you heard anything from ISIS since then? Was this some kind of last ditch plot? Was it supposed to be even bigger than that? Some evidence from that night might lead you to believe that, but I don't know what to think either. I'm right there with him. But this and some things going on in my personal life that have been a little bit of a struggle for me, and just really the ongoing onslaught of negativity and news like that, traumatizing news, it brings you down. I mean, it makes it to where I'm feeling a little bit blue sometimes, right? And I'm a type of person that likes to be optimistic. I said on Truth this week, or a couple of days ago, or maybe it was Sunday, that I like to portray even more optimism than I actually have, because I don't always feel super duper great all the time. I don't wake up in the morning. Some mornings I get up and I do some exercises and jumping jacks, but some mornings I don't feel like doing that. And you know what? I don't. Okay, I make some coffee and I sit and I look on the internet and probably make myself feel worse. But when you're dealing with death, and when you're dealing with news of death and all of that, I've been reminded of a quote from our former president, deceased president, Abraham Lincoln. It's from his Gettysburg Address, and it's the phrase, "It is for us, the living." A little bit leading into that, we have come to dedicate a portion of it, the battlefield and the grave, the memorial site, as a final resting place for those who died here, that the nation might live. They gave the ultimate sacrifice, and he put it in much more eloquent words. He says, "This we may in all propriety do, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here or there, have hallowed it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here." And I think of those victims in Las Vegas, more than 50 people shot. And sadly, Tucker was a little bit incorrect. It was not the deadliest mass shooting in American history. Our own government was the perpetrator of that one. But as far as like civilian stuff goes, it was the deadliest civilian mass shooting in American history. Well, the next thing that Abraham Lincoln said in his speech was, looking at all the carnage and death before them, he said, "It is rather for us, the living. We here be dedicated to the great task remaining before us." And of course, his speech ends with, "Government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth." And that is our great task, because we fight for the freedom to go to concerts like that. We fight for the freedom to, show our faces in public and not have to cover them with a mask because somebody else might be scared and can't prove that we're sick. But just in case, on the off chance that we might be, we have to do it, or you're kicked out, or you're fired, or whatever, or you have the police called on you, have your name plastered on a persona non grata board. It is for us, the living, to be dedicated to the task that they died for, whether they knew it or not, so that their death is not in vain. We must keep fighting. So no matter how weary you get, no matter how tired you get in this fight for liberty, it's worth continuing the fight. I wanted to give another little clip. Let's go ahead and play it. I may run just over the hour by the time we're done, because I want to close this program with a special way that I haven't done before, and I think you'll really enjoy it. But before we get to that, that was a story about a bad guy with a gun or something else. Let's give you a story about a good guy with a gun. In Tacoma, Washington, just the other day, a tactical officer or a special, special unit officer of some kind, took out an active gunman with a single shot from at least 100 yards away. I couldn't tell with the camera because it was like a walleye body cam. Speaking of walleye, body cam camera, and listen to this audio, just a couple of seconds here as he takes down an active shooter.
Incoming to watch Madison. You walk back outside the house and then a back on. Madison, I think you're firing on Madison. Firing on Madison. All right, be reloaded. Reloaded. Are those shots coming from the outside? I don't know.
X-ray 316, shot fired, suspects down.
Suspect down. One shot. Do not mess with that guy or his unit or Tacoma, Washington. And I don't know anything else about that story, but I thought that was pretty cool. And way to go, man. I mean, that was an awesome... If you see the video, it's pretty good video too. So I will leave you with a thought here of a production or a rendition of a well-known song called God of Our Fathers. It was written for the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and it looks back on the providence that God has had over this nation and has protected us through hard times and through easy times, through pestilence, war, and strife. And it's a very good rendition of it, so enjoy it as we conclude this week's broadcast. I hope you'll come back next week. Don't forget to listen on Podbean and all the other channels. Please subscribe to this channel and share it, and I will see you next time. Walk in Liberty. Last Ones by Jazar. Outro music, Chase by Alexander Nakarada. Royalty-free music used under Creative Commons License 3.0 and 4.0 International, creativecommons.org. The Liberty Sound podcast is produced in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Copyright 2022, Ryan Hill and Liberty Sound. All rights reserved.